Okay, so for your three-part drill, some people are going to be doing your three-part drill every single day. It just depends on your group, and some of you are going to be able to do that 2 to 3 times per week. Remember, with a three-part drill, we really want to keep it to 10 minutes. Now, I understand when you're first starting out, it's going to probably take a little bit longer until your students get into the routine, and that's okay too. We just have to determine what's the most important thing for our children to know at this particular time. So what our goal is for us to just hold our cards, and for your students just to say the sound. So ideally, your students would be looking at this and say g, t, ah, eh, p, and so on. So this is exactly what your visual drill should look like. Now, some variations that you might have with your visual drill is that your students don't know the letter names along with the sounds. So maybe you're doing a visual drill where they're just naming the letters. So they could be looking at this and saying G, T, O, E, and so on. And another way that you could do your visual drill is where they're naming the letter and the sound. So they could be saying G says G, switch. T says T, O says Ah, E says Eh. Now, some of your students might also, with their sounds, they might need some visual cues. Maybe they're getting confused between a P and a B and a D and a Q. So maybe we need to have pictures on top of our cards so we can help the students identify which letter it is. So some people like to say P says P as in pig, and maybe there was a picture of a pig. So you can do that as well. Now, again, I showed you this with your large card pack. Just depends on where your students are with your students and what letters that they're going to be working on. So some of you might be working with your capital letters, and with your capital letters you might have, again, we have pictures on them. You could just have them naming their letters in here. You could have them naming their sounds, and these come with pictures on the cards. Okay, so this is another variation of a visual drill. Sometimes teachers like to use a smaller card pack. I really find these useful when I'm working with a small group or one-on-one, a little bit easier to manipulate. Again, sometimes you can put pictures up here, or you can give one of these card packs to your students where they can draw their own pictures on the card. And some of you may have an alphabet strip up in your classroom where you can use a pointer and point to the letters where the students are naming the letter and the sound. You can even have one of your students in the classroom actually being the teacher and pointing to any of the letters up on the alphabet strip, which is also very helpful. Remember, with our visual drill and our review are dealing with the concepts that our students already have mastered. So we would only have cards in our card pack that we have taught our students, or once we have assessed them, we had put in to our review deck. So the same goes along with our auditory part of our drill. What we would have is highlighted all of the concepts that our students have mastered. So if our students have mastered all of this, we would have them highlighted on our phoneme grapheme chart. I like to use them in a plastic screen too, so I can mark them off as I call them out to my students. So again, you're using your phoneme grapheme chart. Your students could be using sand. And with their sand and their sand tray, we like to use 2 different colors of sand. We have a light grain and we have a heavier grain. And you're not showing them the cards, you're not showing them anything. You are actually calling off sounds off of your phoneme grapheme chart. And your students are having their eyes on you and they're repeating that sound. So I'm going to model for you exactly what you would want from your students. So you would look at your chart, you would have a marker, what sounds you're calling off, making sure that you hit all of your basic sounds C through QU. So for example, I could say the sound is and you would repeat And then using your sand tray, you would create that letter in the sand. So you would be naming it as you create it. So it would be N, and you would underline left to right. Says So with the sand, it takes practice to actually use the sand. So for those of you who have kindergartners and you have 20, 25 students in your classroom, this is not probably where you want to start. So we're going to talk about some variations, but I just want to model how the sand is used. Probably the biggest rule with the sand is that you don't want your students to be lifting up their sand tray, shaking it in the air. You're going to see that on the floor. So we want to make sure their sand is spread out on their sand tray and that they give it a quick little shake. And some visual cues and auditory cues you would want to be giving to them is eyes on me. And I would be looking at my chart again, and I would be calling off a sound. So, for example, I could say, ah, and the students would repeat. Here's a good visual cue, is holding your hand to your ear, and the students would be saying, ah, and then all together they would be writing in the sand tray. A says, ah, underlining left to right. Again, I tell them, shake. They would shake their tray, and then eyes on me, and go on to the next sound. So the next sound could be, t, repeat, t. T says t, shake. Another thing that you're going to be seeing in SAN is that some students could be making errors. Okay, you could be saying a sound such as ah, and possibly they're going to be making a capital or a lowercase a and saying ah. A says ah. So what we're going to want to do is listen for those miscues and then draw their attention back to you. And again, this is an auditory part of the drill, so you would want to auditorily cue them. And you could give them key words such as, if I said ah as in octopus, and maybe as in ox, and try to trigger some of those visual or auditory cues for them that could help them be successful in the sand. So you can say, listen again, eyes on me, and your sound is ah. What's your sound? Ah. All together, class, who can tell me the letter that says ah? And hopefully somebody can give you that the letter O says ah. And then they would write it in the sand. O says ah, O says ah, O says ah. Notice what I did. When students miscue, the best thing you could do is have them practice that 3 times in the sand. For an additional variation to your auditory kinesthetic part of the drill is where you're still calling off on the sound, but the students, instead of using the sand, and they have proper letter formation, maybe you passed out dry erase boards for your students. There's also dry erase boards with chalkboards on the back that you can use, and these are great too because these are paddles and they can just hold them up. So you might be calling out a sound off of your phoneme grapheme chart to your students and saying a sound such as shh. And so then your students have to write the letter or letters that create that sound. So they would be writing on their board. Sometimes I give them processing time as such and have them quietly write on their board. And then I'll say, okay, class, all together, let's hear it. And they'd be tracing back over it. S, H says shh. So then they could erase and they can move on their dry erase board. There's also gel boards that some people like to use, and they come with these magnetic pens, and you could be saying a sound to your students, and you can say a sound such as eh. What's the sound? Eh. They repeat it. Again, they write on their gel board. They can hold it up, and all together the class could be saying E says eh. And for them to erase, they just use their finger pressure, and it erases right on the gel board, which is nice. One thing that I really like to use for my students who are struggling with handwriting is not using the dry erase boards or using the sand. So this could be for beginning instruction, is to control it in using a screen, your green crayon, and some dotted letters. So you might have some dotted letters presented to your students. You could be passing out a paper for all your students just like this. For those of you who your students do have letter formation, maybe they're getting a blank grid as such, and they would be filling in each of the squares. So what happens is when you have a grid as such with letters dotted on them with starting points, we would be calling off sounds. They could go in order, or you can go in random order. I prefer to go in random order so I can make sure that they have letter identification and recognition. So in this case, I could say, listen carefully, class, here's your sound. And your first sound is eh. What's your sound? Eh. So they would take their green crayon, place it on the starting point, which we have a green dot for that starting point, and then they would trace over that letter. And they would be naming the letter. E says eh. Then they could put their crayon down and feel those bumps immediately. E says eh. Or you could go through your whole grid and then go back and feel the bumps. Again, that's up to you. So then you would be calling out another sound, and your sound could be p. What's your sound? P. Again, locate your letter, put your green crayon on your starting point, all together, create that letter, and they would be writing P says P. And they would be underlining left to right, but where that line goes is actually right under that belly. We wouldn't want to put a line underneath the P because then that would look like a capital. When we write on lines, this is where the P hangs. So the belly actually hangs on that line. Again, you can put your crayon down, they can go back, feel those bumps, and underline left to right. So for your third part of your 3-part drill is going to be blending. And that's when you're going to have your cards separated into consonant, vowel, consonant format. And we've already separated our cards. We know that belly and mountain letters are going to go here at the end. All our remaining consonants are going to go here in the beginning. And all our yellow or vowel sounds are going to go here in the middle. Ideally, what our goal is for the teacher just to tap like this and then the students to blend the word together. They could be getting a thumbs up for real word or a thumbs down for nonsense words or Dr. Seuss words. So, for example, you might be doing this. L, ah, t, lot, and then giving you the thumbs up. Now what your job is, as the teachers, I usually stand behind my blending board so I know what's coming up, because sometimes we can get words that break rules, and so this way we can monitor that. So then again, they could just be tapping. If students are making a miscue or they're having difficulty with blending, probably what you're going to want to practice is the 3 times rule. 3 times rule is I'm going to do it, we're going to do it, you're going to do it. So it would be k, a, t, kat, do it together, k, a, t, kat, and then you do it where your teacher's just pointing. And you could be flushing through these cards. Now just remember, if you want to just do vowel consonant blending, that's fine too. You could just remove that initial vowel consonant pile, and you could just be tapping at, flipping through here, ag, changing your vowels around, ag, and then even throwing some consonants back in there for them to blend like that. Ag, thag, again, nonsense word, great practice for your students with nonsense words to make sure that they have mastered these consonants, vowel sounds, in words they have never seen before. So we can do words such as this, vam. Again, if they're making mistakes, you're probably not going to want to have consonant, vowel, consonant, but more of a vowel consonant pattern for them. Okay, sometimes what we hear with our students are some additional consonants sometimes in here. Sometimes if they say they could say vlam, or they can add additional consonants at the end. Sometimes what I just tell them is to brush that away or just kind of isolate each sound. It's just because sometimes it could be too visual. So you can say, let me hear this sound. Good. Let me hear the medial sound. Good. Let me hear the ending sound. Let's blend this together. Am. Good. Let's try this. Vam. Perfect. And then maybe you could just do a word family practice. You can go into vam. You could do yam, where you're only changing the initial consonant pile. Wham, so on and so forth. So that's one way you can do your blending portion of your drill. Another, you can make your own blending board. Here, like you can see, we have like just the plexiglass on the board. Some of you can make your own. This is just with a binder that we just bent and got index cards. And this is something you can even have at a learning center with your students, where they can flip through their cards, they can work with a partner, they can flip it, and then they could be blending these together and doing rab, rap. So that's an easy way to do a blending. I can even take index cards for my students, and I can put them on a ring, and I can have these in learning centers as well, where they could practice sounds that you have just taught to your students. And they can have s, t, sit, and their partner can check their work. And again, having all their sounds flipped up and then peeling them down. So they can have another one. It's going to be like this. B, d, bed. So those are easy variations that you can have in your classroom. You can have these at learning centers. If you are dealing with advanced skills, you can add advanced skills to these concept cards. And another variation for blending is to pass out blending folders for your students that have concepts that your students know. And you can have Post-it notes on here. Consonants are one color, vowels are another. And then you have the blending strip at the bottom, the green for go and the red for stop, and for the initial, medial, and final sounds. So if you wanted to state a word to your students and the word was hit, the students could repeat the word hit, and then you would want them to find the Post-its and then bring them down and do okay? And if your students could do that, they can share it, they can show you, they can show their partner, and then you can continue from there. So if this says hit class, how can you change hit to hut? What do you need to do? What sound changes? So listen carefully. Hit to hut. Finger tap it, and it could be t, hut. Oh, the medial sound changes, or my vowel sound, so I need to change my I to my U. Great job. So if that says hut, how can we change hut into hug? Here's your word, hug. Tap it. G, hug. What sounds changes? Oh, my final sound. I'm going to have to find the letter G that says G, and I'm going to place it here. So again, this is fun. This is something they could do with partners. This is something that they can do on their own. If you have things pre-recorded for them, they could be hearing them and then manipulating the sounds down below. Once you're done with the 3-part drill and you're finished with blending, then you're going to move into the vowel intensive. The vowel intensive is for you to practice with your students their short vowel sounds. So you may not always be doing the vowel intensive. So at this point, we're assuming that our students know all the letters C through QU. So if they knew C through QU, then they would have all 5 vowels that they would be practicing. And you have these visual cues in your training manual. And the visual cues for A is going to be apple. For E, we have elephant. For U, we have umbrella. For I, we have igloo. And for O, we have octopus. And we color-coded them just to help your students a little bit better, just for identification by color. You can have them all the same color if you choose. So what we have the students do is take whatever vowel sounds that they know. And like I said, at this time, we're going to assume that they know all 5. And we have them lay them out in alphabetical order. So they might have them in front of them saying A says A, E says eh, I says I, O says ah, U says So they're going to have their vowel sticks laying flat. And as the teacher, what you're going to be doing is using, this is just a sample of what you could be doing to call off sounds. So when we're calling off sounds to our students, we always start here with just our single vowel sound. Then we progress into vowel consonant and then consonant vowel consonant. Again, this is an auditory practice of a drill where you're stating a sound, they're repeating it, finding the letter, and holding it up. So for example, being the teacher, you could call off a sound, the sound is ah. They would repeat ah, and then hold this up and say, A says ah. Excellent. Ah. Students would repeat ah. O says ah. If your students are doing well with the vowel sounds in isolation, then you can move into vowel consonant. This is just a cheat sheet that you can use. Don't feel as though you're tied to this. The thing is that you have to make sure your vowel sound is pure, meaning it's a short vowel sound. You would not want to say sounds such as or, even though that has the spelling of O, it's not giving us our pure short vowel sound of ah. So in this case, if we want to do vowel consonant, we could say endings of words such as ot. They would repeat ot, and then pull out the vowel sound. Ah, O says ah. Okay? I could say ip. They would repeat ip. Ip. I says I. Good. Ed. Ed. Hold it up. E says eh. Great job. If they're doing well, then you can progress on to consonant vowel consonant. And this is where you're giving them syllables, and they have to repeat those syllables and extract out that vowel sound. So in this case, you could be saying things such as sop, and they would repeat sop. O says ah. Lug, lug. U says leg, leg. E says Okay? So this is a quick little drill that you could be doing. Like I said, you could be using the sticks. If the sticks seems to be a little too juvenile with your students, that's fine. You can always get tents or index cards, and you can have your students lay out the index cards in alphabetical order again, and they can hold them up. If you need them on different colors, that's fine. A, E, I, O, U. Again, doing the same motion of just calling off the sound and holding them up. A says ah. And with this, sometimes I have to put pictures on their cards, or I can even put little key words to help them for the vowel part of the drill. This is something that you would not want to eliminate as part of your review because, as I said, it's the most difficult concept for your students to master is their short vowel sounds. In addition to doing something like this, we can also have a little fun with our students, and we can even have cups, styrofoam cups, or any kind of Dixie cups that you have, and possibly have some type of manipulative or food or something if you're allowed to have peanut butter in your classrooms. That would be amazing. And then you could call off sounds to your students, and you can say if, then they would repeat. I says it and put it in the appropriate cup. You could say ah, they can do this. The great thing about using some type of chip or some type of marker that's different colors is that you can actually put this into a math lesson too. They can count all their chips. They can see which one has the most chips, the different colors, and you can kind of segment them out that way. And maybe the A's won the race or something like that because they had the most chips in there. Okay, so this is just something quick and easy that you can do with your students and try to have some differentiation with your instruction because it can get a little tedious after some time of doing the same thing over and over again. So basically what we've been working on is a 3-part drill, reviewing concepts that we know, and we're following our recipe for reading sequence charts. So we have to decide where in our sequence chart we are. So for example, if we were looking at our sequence chart and we had finished and reviewed with our students the concepts C through R, so those are what we would be reviewing in a 3-part drill. We would be doing those visually, auditorily, we would be doing blending, and then our vowel intensive would actually include all of the vowels except E. So if we were reviewing C through R, our new concept that we would be teaching is the letter F. And so what I want to do is just model for you a little bit about the steps that are important when you're going about teaching a new concept. So your sequence chart guides you of what you're actually going to be teaching. Okay, so once you're done reviewing with a 3-part drill, then you're going to be moving into teaching a new concept. But remember, you cannot do a 3-part drill if you don't have any previously learned concepts.